When a homeless kid shouted, "Don't eat that," no one expected what would happen next. The Garden Cafe, nestled in the heart of the city park, was a well-known haunt for the upper crust, shaded by perfectly trimmed trees and serenaded by the gentle splash of a marble fountain nearby. It was early afternoon, and the place buzzed with chatter, clinking cutlery, and servers gliding through tables with trays of gourmet dishes and hand-poured espresso. The air carried the scent of fresh croissants and blooming jasmine. One guest seemed entirely unmoved by the charm. At a prime table beneath a canopy umbrella sat Franklin Dorsey, a man whose name appeared regularly in Forbes and Wall Street Journal headlines. At 70, he had made his fortune in commercial development before branching into industries only a few could afford to dream about. With silver hair slicked back and a tailored navy suit, he exuded the silent command of someone who was used to being obeyed. Across from him sat his wife, Alyssa, decades younger and as immaculately styled as any fashion influencer. Her perfectly styled waves framed a face of practiced beauty, and her ruby-red lips curled into a smile that didn't quite touch her eyes. She fiddled with the sparkling tennis bracelet on her wrist, her gaze more interested in her phone than the man seated across from her. A few yards away, a boy stood just beyond the iron railing separating the outdoor seating from the rest of the park. His hoodie, 2 sizes too big, nearly swallowed his small frame, and his sneakers were frayed and mismatched. His name was Jaden. Most locals recognized him, even if they didn't speak to him. He was part of the scenery, always lingering, always watching, but never acknowledged. Franklin tapped the face of his luxury watch. "You're somewhere else again," he murmured, his tone soft but edged. Alyssa blinked and glanced up, offering a practiced smile. "I'm here, darling," she purred, brushing her fingers lightly over his hand. "These lunches mean a lot to me." Jaden's stomach rumbled as he edged closer, his body moving like a shadow along the perimeter of the patio. His eyes locked onto Franklin's table, a rich tomato bisque steaming in a bone-white bowl, artisan bread resting beside a tall flute of sparkling water. Then something shifted. Franklin adjusted his glasses and reached for his phone, and Jaden noticed a flicker of movement from Alyssa. Her hand slipped into her designer tote, her fingers curling around what looked like a small, clear vial. She flicked the cap off effortlessly, tilting her hand ever so slightly over the steaming bowl, and the liquid vanished into the soup without a trace. Jaden's breath caught in his throat. He froze, eyes locked on her as she casually stirred the bowl, her face unchanged. Then she leaned closer to Franklin, her voice low but just loud enough for him to hear. "After everything I've done to get here, don't you dare mess this up." Jaden blinked hard, trying to make sense of what he'd just witnessed. Could someone who looked so flawless, sitting in such a refined setting, really be doing something so dark? But the chill that crept up his spine told him this wasn't just paranoia. Something was seriously wrong. Crouching lower behind the patio's iron railing, Jaden's heart pounded as if trying to warn him. No one else had noticed. No one else had even looked her way. Only him. His fingers curled into fists, nails pressing into his palms, grounding him as the city's elite chatted on, oblivious. The hunger gnawed at his belly, but he couldn't look away. Franklin seemed tired, distracted, staring at his phone while his spoon hovered over the bowl. Alyssa was all grace again, her smile warm and poised, her fingers brushing her cheek as if nothing had happened. Jaden's chest tightened. His mind screamed to leave, to walk away and forget it. Who would believe a kid like him anyway? Just a scrawny boy in a worn-out hoodie with no place at these tables. But the image of that vial haunted him. His eyes darted to the spoon, now dipping into the soup. He had seen her do it. He knew what was about to happen. His legs moved before he could second-guess it. He pushed off the railing and strode toward the table, every step heavy but fueled by urgency. His voice cracked as he shouted, "Don't eat that!" The entire cafe paused. Heads turned. Conversations fell silent mid-word. A fork clattered to the pavement. Franklin froze, the spoon just inches from his mouth, stunned eyes locking on Jaden. Alyssa's head snapped around, her face turning sharp in an instant. "What did you just say?" she hissed, her voice slicing the air. Jaden stood his ground, voice shaking but strong enough to carry. "She put something in your food. I saw it. Don't eat it." A wave of gasps rippled through the cafe as every face turned toward the unfolding scene. The silence that followed was heavy enough to drown in. Jaden stayed rooted to the spot, his chest rising and falling with each breath, adrenaline pulsing through every vein. Franklin's eyes darted between the trembling boy and the woman across from him. "What is he talking about, Alyssa?" he asked, his voice controlled, though the spoon in his hand wavered before he set it gently on the table. Alyssa's facade shattered like glass under pressure. She stood abruptly, her chair screeching against the patio stone. "You filthy liar!" she snapped, her tone sharp as a blade. "How dare you accuse me of something so disgusting? Who let you in here anyway?" Her words were laced with venom, but Jaden didn't back down. He kept his gaze locked on Franklin, urgency woven into every syllable. "I saw her pour something into your soup while you weren't paying attention," he said, his voice steadier now. "If you don't believe me, smell it." Franklin's face drained of color as he slowly turned to Alyssa, his expression hardening. "Alyssa, tell me the truth. What is this?" he asked. Quieter this time, but there was no mistaking the weight behind his words. Alyssa let out a dry scoff, waving him off. "He's making it up. Look at him. He's probably hungry or trying to hustle you." Her eyes flicked back to Jaden with open contempt. But the boy stood firm, stepping closer to the table, fists clenched at his sides. "I'm not making this up," he insisted, louder now. "She doesn't want you to know the truth, but I saw everything." Franklin hovered over the bowl again, torn between reason and suspicion, but something in Jaden's voice struck a chord. The cafe had gone completely silent. Cutlery, conversation, and clinking glasses forgotten. Patrons watched with bated breath as Franklin leaned back slightly, studying the boy's face with the sharp scrutiny of a man who'd been lied to before, but this time it felt different. The kid wasn't begging, wasn't flinching, wasn't trying to sell a story. "Jaden, is it?" Franklin asked, his tone level but edged with caution. The boy nodded. "I'm telling the truth. Please, just don't eat it." Alyssa barked a bitter laugh, folding her arms. "This is absurd," she spat. "He's just some stray kid looking for a spotlight. You're really going to give this nonsense the time of day?" But Franklin didn't look at her. He lifted the spoon again, holding it to his nose, the tremor in his hand returning. Not from fear, but from the slow unraveling of trust. "Alyssa," he said evenly, eyes narrowed. "You heard him. Tell me, what is going on?" Her mouth pressed into a firm line, a crack forming in the polished image she wore like armor. "I can't believe you'd even ask me that," she said, her voice rising with disbelief. "That's an insult." She turned toward the onlookers, her voice louder now, desperate. "He's lying. Look at him. He probably doesn't even know who you are. Why would you believe him instead of me?" Alyssa's words lingered in the air, but they didn't land the way she hoped. The crowd around them had begun whispering, eyes bouncing between the young boy, the elegant woman, and the man at the center of it all. "You think she really did something?" She looked shaken. "That kid sounds serious." The quiet murmurs only added fuel to Alyssa's unraveling temper. She slammed both palms onto the table, her composure cracking wide open. "I've had enough of this, Franklin. Eat your damn soup and let's leave," she snapped, her voice trembling with barely restrained fury. But Jaden wasn't going anywhere. He stepped closer, fists clenched tight at his sides. "If you don't believe me, then have someone test it," he said, louder now. "You've got doctors, labs, anyone who could figure it out. But don't eat that. You'll regret it." Franklin's jaw clenched as his eyes dropped back to the untouched bowl, the spoon still hovering in his hand. Slowly, he turned to face Alyssa again. "You've been acting off lately. And now this?" Alyssa's face flushed, and her words stumbled. "I don't know what you mean. Are you saying I poison me?" Franklin interrupted, his voice cutting clean through the murmuring cafe. Gasps rose from nearby tables. Jaden held his ground, heart racing, but gaze locked, unflinching. Whatever happened now was no longer in his hands. Alyssa straightened, her entire posture stiffening as she snapped into something cold, defensive. "This is absurd. I'm not staying here for this circus," she said, snatching her handbag. But before she could step away, Franklin's hand shot out and grabbed her wrist, firm despite his age. "You're not leaving," he said flatly. "Not until we get answers." The waiter, who had been frozen mid-step, finally found his voice. "Should I contact the authorities?" The question sent a ripple through the onlookers, and for the first time, genuine fear flickered in Alyssa's eyes. "No, don't you dare!" she barked, panic leaking into her voice. "This is all just a misunderstanding. Franklin, you can't honestly—" He lifted a hand, silencing her. "Yes," he said, without breaking eye contact. Jaden felt a wave of relief surge through his chest, but he knew it wasn't over yet. The truth still needed to surface. The cafe seemed suspended in time as the waiter disappeared into the building, and Franklin released Alyssa's wrist with slow precision. Her once glossy confidence had begun to crack, her poise crumbling under the weight of the moment. She glanced around in desperation, lips parted as if to speak, but no sound followed, just the quiet panic of someone who'd run out of exits. Meanwhile, Jaden stood just a few feet back, his hands trembling slightly as the gravity of the moment closed in around him. He had done everything he could, but now uncertainty crept in like a shadow. What if Franklin didn't believe him? What if she twisted the story and turned it all against him? He clenched his fists, forcing himself not to back away. Then Franklin's voice sliced through the tension. "Jaden, you said you saw her add something to the soup. Can you describe exactly what it was?" The boy stepped forward quickly, nodding with conviction. It was a tiny bottle, like something for cough medicine. Clear liquid. She emptied some into the bowl while you were checking your phone, then stirred it with the spoon. I swear I saw everything. Franklin's jaw tightened as he slowly turned toward Alyssa, who was already shaking her head, her tone defensive and breathless. "This is insane. He's making it up. Why would I ever—" But Franklin cut her off sharply. Why would he lie? What does he possibly have to gain? The murmurs in the background rose again, blending with the distant wail of sirens that sent a ripple of anxiety through the room. Alyssa's gaze flicked toward the sound, and for a flicker of a moment, the polished veneer she wore so well finally cracked. Panic bled into her expression. In a last-ditch effort to regain control, she turned on Jaden with venom in her voice. "You've been watching us, haven't you? Trying to cause problems? Because you hate people who actually have something." Her words hit like a slap, but Jaden didn't move. "I'm not jealous," he said steadily. "I saw what you did, and I wasn't going to let you get away with it." The sirens drew closer, and within moments 2 officers stepped into the cafe, their presence casting a heavy silence over the space. One scanned the crowd, the other approached the table. "What's going on here?" he asked, calm but direct. Franklin rose to his feet, the authority in his voice still evident. "Officers, I believe someone tampered with my food. This young man says my wife poisoned it." The 2 officers exchanged a brief glance before one leaned down to inspect the bowl, cautiously sniffing it. He then turned to Alyssa. "Ma'am, can you explain this?" Her face burned red as she crossed her arms tightly. "This is ridiculous. He's just some kid off the street trying to stir things up. Franklin, are you really buying into this nonsense?" But the officer didn't waver. "We'll need to analyze what's in the bowl." Reaching for it. "No!" Alyssa snapped, her voice cracking with urgency. Her reaction made several people turn to stare. Her outburst had betrayed her calm. The officer paused, eyes narrowing. "Is there something you want to share before we continue?" Alyssa froze, her chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. Her eyes darted from Franklin to the officers, and her grip tightened on her designer bag. With a sharp exhale and her composure in pieces, she hissed through clenched teeth. "Fine. You want the truth? I'm done living under his shadow, tired of him pulling the strings on every part of my life. He wasn't even supposed to be here this long, and I—" Alyssa stopped herself, her words halting mid-sentence as the weight of what she'd just revealed hit her too late. The cafe burst into shocked gasps, several diners grabbing their phones to film what was quickly turning into something surreal. Franklin's face drained of all color as her confession slammed into him like a freight train. One of the officers stepped forward, jaw tight, eyes grim. "You're under arrest for attempted murder. Keep your hands where we can see them." Alyssa's composure shattered entirely as she shrieked, jerking away in panic while they cuffed her wrists behind her back. "You don't get it. I deserved everything." "Everything he had," she shouted, her voice wild as they walked her out, the sound echoing through the stunned room. Franklin dropped into his seat like the air had been knocked from his lungs, pushing the soup bowl away with a trembling hand. For several seconds he said nothing, his face etched with disbelief and the sting of betrayal. Then his eyes slowly found Jaden, who remained frozen in place, unsure if he should stay or quietly disappear. But Franklin's expression shifted, the hardness giving way to something else, something almost tender: gratitude. Jaden hadn't just intervened, he had unveiled a reality Franklin never would have imagined. The atmosphere in the cafe gradually returned to a hush of whispers and sideways glances as Alyssa's screams faded outside with the officers. Some customers looked at Franklin with sympathy, others with stunned fascination. But Jaden didn't move. He stood rigid, unsure what came next, until Franklin finally turned to him and spoke softly. "Jaden." The invitation carried a weight that made Jaden hesitate, but after a moment he nodded and slowly slid into the chair across from him, shoulders tight. "You saved my life today," Franklin said, his voice low but sincere. "I don't know how to thank you." Jaden shifted uncomfortably, his fingers clutching the edge of the table. "I didn't do it for thanks. I couldn't walk away and pretend I didn't see what she did." Franklin nodded, his gaze drifting as if reviewing the entire sequence of events again. "Most people would have," he murmured. "Most would have kept walking, minded their business. But you didn't. That takes guts." Jaden looked down, his voice barely audible. "I guess. I just hate seeing people get hurt. That's all." Franklin leaned back slightly, his eyes now truly seeing the boy, not as a background figure on the street, but as someone real, someone with pain and purpose. "How long have you been out here?" he asked gently. The question caught Jaden off guard. He glanced away, voice quiet and colored with embarrassment. "A while." Franklin's brow furrowed, but he didn't push further. Instead, he slipped a sleek black phone from his inner pocket and stepped a few feet away to make a call. "Just stay here," he said quietly. Jaden watched nervously, unsure what to expect. His pulse pounded with uncertainty. Was he about to get kicked out? Would Franklin call someone to have him escorted off the property? But when the older man returned, his expression had softened. Calm, even compassionate. "Help's on the way," he said plainly. Jaden asked, confusion flickering in his eyes. Franklin nodded. "I called someone I trust. They're going to make sure you've got a bed tonight. A real place. And if you'll let me, I'd like to offer more than that." Jaden's eyes widened. "You don't have to," he said quickly, defensive instinct taking over. "I didn't do it for money or anything like that." Franklin offered a faint smile. "I know you didn't. That's exactly why I want to. What you did today, most wouldn't have. And if there were more people like you in this world, it'd be a far better place." For the first time in what felt like forever, something warm stirred in Jaden's chest. He dropped his gaze, words failing him. Around them the cafe began to settle. Chairs shifted, conversations resumed, but a quiet reverence still lingered. Franklin lifted his glass, took a sip of water, then spoke again, his tone reflective. "Sometimes life puts someone in your path to remind you how fragile it all is, and how powerful one voice can be. You did that today, Jaden. You changed my story, and maybe, just maybe, I can help change yours." Jaden looked up, and for the first time in years, his dark eyes shimmered with something he hadn't felt in ages. The two of them sat quietly as sunlight stretched across the patio, shadows shifting like pages turning. Everyone who'd witnessed what happened walked away changed. Because courage doesn't always show up in polished shoes or tailored suits, and compassion isn't reserved for the wealthy. Sometimes, the most remarkable strength lives in those the world forgets to notice. Jaden hadn't just prevented a tragedy. He reminded a room full of strangers what it means to stand up when no one else will. If this story touched you, be sure to hit that subscribe button and stick with us for more powerful stories of bravery, truth, and second chances. Share this video with someone who needs to remember. Small choices can spark the biggest changes.